In 1971, the US dollar lost its backing by gold. By every law of economics, the dollar should have died right then and there. And for 3 years, it almost did. By 1974, the American dream was running on fumes. The stock market had crashed 45%. Inflation was eating people's savings alive. And for the first time in history, Americans were waiting in long lines just to buy gasoline. The world was losing faith in American money. The global sharks were circling, waiting for the dollar to collapse, but it didn't collapse. Because in July of 1974, one man took a secret flight to the middle of the Arabian desert. He wasn't a diplomat, he was a bond trader, and he carried a deal that would change the world for the next 50 years. His name was William Simon. He was the newly appointed US Treasury Secretary, but before that, he was a legend on Wall Street. He knew how to structure a deal. President Nixon, who was on the verge of being impeached, gave Simon a mission that was officially billed as an economic diplomacy tour. But that was a cover story. The real mission was simple but desperate: bankruptcy prevention. The US government was spending more money than it had. We needed someone to buy our debt, and we needed them to buy a lot of it. There was only one place on earth with enough cash to bail out America, and that was Saudi Arabia. Because of the oil crisis, the price of oil had quadrupled. The House of Saud was drowning in money. So much money, they literally didn't know how to spend it. Simon's flight landed in the coastal city of Jeddah. He had 4 days to convince the king to bankroll the United States. Failure was not an option. The negotiations were tense. The Saudis didn't trust the West. But Simon understood leverage. He knew the Saudis had money, but they lacked one thing: security. They were a rich kingdom surrounded by enemies: Iran, Iraq, and the Soviet Union. So, the US made an offer. We promised to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. We promised to sell them military equipment, tanks, and fighter jets. We promised to guarantee the security of their dynasty against all enemies. In exchange, the Saudis had to do two things. First, they had to price all their oil sales in US dollars only. It didn't matter if France or Japan wanted to buy oil, they first had to get US dollars to pay for it. This created a permanent artificial demand for the dollar. Every country on earth needs oil, so every country on earth now needed dollars. But the second part of the deal was the masterstroke. It became known as Petrodollar Recycling. Simon convinced the king to take those billions of dollars they earned from selling oil and invest them directly back into US Treasury bonds. Think about that loop. The US prints money to buy oil, the Saudis take that money and lend it back to the US government. The US uses that loaned money to build weapons, which they sell back to the Saudis. It was the ultimate infinite money glitch. There was just one problem. King Faisal demanded total secrecy. He knew that if the Arab world found out he was funding the American government, the same government supporting Israel, he could be overthrown. So, William Simon agreed to a condition that remained a state secret for 41 years. The US Treasury created a special add-on rule. They hid the Saudi investments by lumping them into generic categories in the data. No one could know exactly how much American debt Saudi Arabia owned. The deal was signed, the dollar was saved, and the petrodollar era began. For 50 years, this secret deal allowed America to run massive deficits without consequence. We could print money because the world had to hold it to buy energy. But in 2024, the winds changed. Saudi Arabia announced they are now open to selling oil in other currencies. Why did they do this? It wasn't just about economics, it was about leverage. In June 2024, the 50-year Joint Commission Agreement quietly expired. The internet claimed the petrodollar was dead. It wasn't dead, but the marriage was on the rocks. Saudi Arabia had watched the US weaponize the dollar against Russia, seizing foreign assets with a keystroke. They realized that total reliance on the dollar was no longer just good business. It was a national security risk. So, they made a move. Without asking for Washington's permission, they joined Project mBridge in June 2024, a digital currency platform built with China that could process oil trades instantly, bypassing American banks entirely. It was a quiet rebellion. They didn't need US permission because the 1974 deal wasn't a formal treaty, it was a handshake that relied on trust. and that trust was fading. The consequences were silent, but immediate. The US applied pressure on the financial plumbing of the world. By late 2024, the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, abruptly pulled out of Project mBridge, likely under immense American diplomatic pressure. The message to Riyadh was clear: you can look for the exit, but we still control the building. Did Saudi Arabia face a threat? Not a military one, but a strategic squeeze. And ultimately, the gamble paid off. The breakup turned out to be a high-stakes renegotiation. By November 2025, the tension broke when President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman signed a massive new strategic defense agreement. Saudi Arabia got the ironclad security guarantees they always wanted, and in return, they kept the oil flowing. But even with the new deal, the psychological barrier was shattered. The world saw that the Saudis could look elsewhere. The monopoly is breaking. The machine William Simon built in the desert is rusting. If the world no longer needs dollars to buy oil, what happens to all that debt? We move from a gold standard to an oil standard, but history tells us that all standards eventually fail. The question isn't if the system will change, but what will replace it. If you want to survive the shift, make sure you subscribe now to see more content like this. See you next time.